It has a black tower, a striking presence at the southern tip of the Misty Mountains. While it would later become synonymous with the wizard Saruman, it would be created by the earliest Gondorians, the survivors of Numenor. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the history of Isengard. While we don't know for certain when Orthanc was constructed, we do know who built it. After their home of the island realm of Numenor is destroyed, Isildur and his brother Anarion found the realm of Gondor in 3320 of the Second Age. Over the centuries, the early Gondorians would not only build the great cities of Minas Ithil, Osgiliath, and Minas Anor, but they would also build some of the greatest fortresses and structures in all Middle-earth. These would include stone bridges crossing the mighty Anduin River, the Argonath at the northern border of the realm, the fortress that would later be known as Helm's Deep, and the fortress of Isengard. Isengard is built sometime between the founding of Gondor in 3320 and the formation of the Last Alliance in 3430. Within the circle of Isengard, the Gondorians build a massive 500-foot structure. It consists of 4 welded pillars of a deep, gleaming black stone. At its top, the tower had 4 pinnacles opening out, each coming to a sharp point. Between the points there was a polished floor, which by the later Third Age would have many strange signs written on it. It is described in detail in the 2 towers. A great ring wall of stone, like towering cliffs, stood out from the shelter of the mountainside, from which it ran and then returned again. One entrance only was there made in it, a great arch delved in the southern wall. Here through the black rock a long tunnel had been hewn, closed at either end with mighty doors of iron. They were so wrought and poised upon their huge hinges, posts of steel driven into the living stone, that when unbarred, they could be moved with a light thrust of the arms, noiselessly. One who passed in and came at length out of the echoing tunnel beheld a plain, a great circle, somewhat hollowed like a vast shallow bowl. A mile it measured from rim to rim. When it's constructed by the early Gondorians, they place one of the 7 Palantiri within the fortress. Its location on the northern border of Gondor, and being centrally located in Middle-earth itself, makes it uniquely well-positioned for a Palantir, and for the protection of Gondor. As the Second Age gives way to the Third, the Gondorians continue to man the fortress in defense of their realm. While the lands of Calenarthon were never as densely populated as the southern lands of Gondor, it was vastly affected by the Great Plague of 1636, leading many surviving Gondorians to migrate eastward. In the aftermath, the Tower of Orthanc is closed, and its keys are sent to Minas Tirith. Despite a massive depopulation of Calenarthon, the fortress of Isengard would remain manned by a small garrison of soldiers. They are led by a hereditary chieftain and play an important role in the protection of Gondor's northern border along the Isen. As time progresses, their chieftain and his company grow more secretive, and the chieftain becomes known as the Lord of Isengard. The men who become the Rohirrim would settle in the former Calenarthon, and it's their belief that the men of Isengard were meddling in dark magic. These were days long after the line of the kings of Gondor had ended, and the ruling stewards were forced to turn their attention to battles with their enemies to the east and the south. In time, they quit sending emissaries to Isengard completely. The Rohirrim likewise faced enemies invading from the east, and neither realm, in their preoccupation, realized the line of the Gondorian chieftains had failed completely. Over the years, these men had long intermingled with the Dunlendings, who came to settle around Isengard. They take over Isengard and kill any of the Gondorian guards who refuse to join them. A period of peace in Rohan would come to an end when these Dunlendings would begin open hostilities against the Rohirrim. In response to these raids, King Deor of Rohan leads an expedition north, where he discovers Isengard is under the control of the Dunlendings. Unfortunately, Rohan didn't have enough might to retake Isengard. and Gondor could not send aid as they were facing troubles of their own. Thus, Deor stations a mighty force of Rohirrim in the Westfold to discourage further raids. The occupation of Isengard by the Dunlendings would lead to a time of warfare during the reign of King Gram. Things would come to a head during the reign of Gram's son, Helm Hammerhand. These events are covered in full in my Helm Hammerhand video, but Wulf would lead the Dunlendings to invade Rohan and overthrow Edoras. During the long winter, they laid siege to the Hornburg, and the Dunlendings would not only suffer during the brutal winter, but many would also be killed by Helm Hammerhand himself. In the end, Helm's nephew Freyolf would avenge his uncle and become the new king. Near the end of 2759, Freyolf drives the Dunlendings from Isengard, reclaiming the realm. With both Gondor and Rohan suffering from war and the long winter, they face a dilemma. History has shown the importance of guarding their northern border, and the risk of letting Isengard fall into enemy hands. It just so happens that at this time, the wizard Saruman returns from his travels in the east. He offers to Freyolf and Steward Baron of Gondor that he could take up residence at Isengard. Both Freyolf and Baron gladly welcome the idea of one of the Istari guarding their northern border. Baron gives Saruman the keys of Orthanc, and the valley becomes known as Nan Curunir, the Valley of Saruman. After the final meeting of the White Council in 2953, Saruman makes Isengard his permanent residence and begins fortifying it. By now, he already covets the One Ring. As he anticipated, Saruman discovers the Palantir in the Tower of Orthanc, and around the year 3000, he uses it for the first time. Sauron, using the Ithil stone that had been moved to Barad-dûr, begins corrupting the wizard's mind to his will. Saruman would continue operating in secret, searching for the ring. It is also around this time, and perhaps slightly before, that Saruman would begin amassing orcs in the caverns beneath Isengard. Nearly 20 years later, Gandalf the Grey comes to Isengard seeking Saruman's advice. Saruman reveals his treachery and demands Gandalf to join with him. When Gandalf refuses, he's imprisoned atop Orthanc. In the 2 months he spends atop the tower, Gandalf sees Isengard transformed, as the trees and greenery that had once covered the area are replaced by pits and forges. Orcs and wolves come to dwell in Isengard, forming Saruman's army. Gandalf would finally be rescued by Gwaihir on September 18th, and 2 days later, the Nazgûl arrive at Isengard. They are sent by Sauron after failing in their search east of the Misty Mountains, for he believes Saruman now had information regarding the ring. However, we are told that even the Nazgûl had not the strength to assault the Ring of Isengard. Instead, Saruman's voice speaks from the very gate of Isengard itself, telling the Witch King that Gandalf had departed toward Rohan, and the Nazgûl ride off. Saruman would send forth his armies from Isengard during the early days of the War of the Ring. His offensive against Rohan begins on February 25th, 3019, and as the Fellowship passes the Argonath, Saruman's forces attack the Rohirrim in the first battle of the Fords of Isen. The orcs are victorious, and Saruman's goal of killing King Theoden's son Theodred is achieved. On March 2nd, Saruman launches a second offensive, resulting in the second battle of the Fords of Isen. The army includes not only the Uruk-hai Saruman had bred in the caverns below Isengard, but also Dunlendings, the longtime enemies of Rohan. With Isengard unleashed, Saruman's army would continue on to Helm's Deep. That night, another battle would be fought, the Battle of Isengard. Unlooked for, the Ents of Fangorn Forest would fight back at Saruman for the destruction he had wrought upon their woods. Treebeard and his Ents overrun the small group of orcs and men left in the fortress. While they take control of Isengard, they are unable to assail Orthanc itself, for it was mightily made. Theoden, Gandalf, and the victorious men of Rohan arrive on March 5th to parley with Saruman. It is then that Gandalf breaks Saruman's staff, and expels him from the Order of the Astari. Gandalf leads Treebeard in command of Isengard, and the former wizard within. When Gandalf and the Fellowship return to Isengard on their way home after Sauron's downfall, they learn that Treebeard allowed Saruman to leave. When they arrive, Treebeard welcomes them to the Treegarth of Orthanc, and in the time since their last visit, the Ents had destroyed the Ring of Isengard and filled the circle with orchards and trees. A stream flows into a clear lake where the great tower of Orthanc still stands. In one of his many moves to set the world right, Aragorn decrees that the Ents shall have complete control over the new Treegarth of Orthanc. He has the Palantir that was recovered from Saruman returned to the tower. At this time, Orthanc is searched, and they discover that Saruman had hoarded many jewels and heirlooms that were not rightfully his. With Gimli's assistance, a hidden door is discovered in the tower. They find a small golden case that had been used by Isildur to bear the One Ring, and the Elendilmere, an heirloom that had been lost since Isildur's death in the Anduin River. King Elisar takes the Elendilmere and establishes his full kingship of Arnor as well as Gondor. Presumably, Treebeard and his Ents would continue their work well into the Fourth Age, undoing the evils of Saruman and restoring Isengard to its former glory. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Listen Me the Cinda, Mandu Pandu, Andrew Carlisle, The Mighty Mim, Team Weasel, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Salim Rahman, Zetrock, Berto Berg, Grand Strategy Nerd, Graham Darracott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Michael Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.